Hello, everybody. It's Sunday, March 13th, and it's the 18th day of the war. Today we held church at our house because the Culture Club was so cold last week. And after the service, we just kind of sat around and talked. It's kind of like people didn't want things to end. But finally, we all got up and put the tables back in place, and we set the tables for lunch and brought out the food, and then we talked a whole bunch more for a while. Our state has decided that children will start school again, but of course it's going to be online. Vika, one of the ladies from our church who's kind of like a refugee from the city living with us, has to go back into work because she works in the education field. Mark took her back today because she has to be there Monday morning. We're already missing her, and she's missing us, and we've already communicated quite a bit with her. And she's hoping that once she gets there and things get established, that they'll kind of understand what the process is, and she might be able to work online from our house. And if she has to be there the whole week, she's thinking about coming back for the weekend to stay with us. We're going to be seeing her on Tuesday when we go in to feed the homeless. We're going to take her some of the cabbage rolls that she helped me put together for hours. Velodia, our graduated client, who's also here with us, kind of as a refugee, he works at a school in the town not too far away, but in maintenance. And he's not sure yet if he's going to have to go back into work. Of course, since the kids are not there at the school, there's a good chance he won't, but he's kind of waiting for his boss to tell him yes or no. Pastor Sergey and his family left for their house back in the town because their son Andre will have online classes as well. And the internet out here in the village is just not good enough for that. During lunch today, I asked Sergey about the town and how many people had left or evacuated, and he said it was a pretty small amount, really. Only 3 in Andre's full class or grade left Ukraine and went abroad. And he guessed maybe like 10% of his area had actually evacuated. And that town is the one where we feed emergency workers. And they had a little bit of excitement last night at the roadblock where we enter the town when we go to feed. Apparently last night, 3 men came flying up in a car, and there's a curfew. You're not supposed to be out. And they tried not to stop. They wanted to barrel through the roadblock, and they were warned to stop, and they didn't. And so their vehicle was fired upon. The vehicle was damaged enough to stop it, and only 1 man in the car was actually wounded. He has a bullet wound in his thigh. There's no news yet on why they did it, if they were the enemy, what was going on. We just don't know, but serious business when you try and run through a roadblock. Today, as Volodya and I were taking the dinner to the emergency workers, I overheard them talking about the American journalist who was killed in Irpin, right outside of Kiev. And I stopped and talked with them about it. And we hadn't been seen where that person worked, but it looks like it's New York Times. And the Russians were attacking there viciously. We've seen a lot in the news here about that. And I mentioned to them that I had seen a female reporter for CNN who was shooting live of the people coming across a bridge that the Ukrainian army had actually blown up in order to keep the Russians from coming into Kiev. And the Ukrainian soldiers were helping all of these civilians who were trying to evacuate out of Irpin. And she was talking and talking, and then she stopped and she went to help a man. But she didn't really help him, but she's like, can I help you? Can I help you? And then she was like posing for the camera, and we all kind of laughed about that because here pretty much CNN is considered propaganda. So one last thing, sad news for us today. We think our pig Lulu had a miscarriage. Just before 8 o'clock this morning. She was due on March 31st. We're not sure if it's a complete miscarriage or just maybe 1 placenta miscarried. This is the first time we've ever had it happen. I did a little research real quick on the internet to kind of confirm suspicions, and then Pastor Sergey, who's an agricultural specialist and animal husbandry, kind of confirmed it. So we'll just keep an eye on her since her due date is March 31st. But it's kind of a big downer for a lot of us today, especially Slava, who takes care of the pigs, and myself. Okay, in the news, let's start with Volodya's hometown. The people there were protesting outside of the administration building because I had actually seen this video of Russian soldiers coming and physically taking a hold of the mayor and whisking him off. And so the crowds were chanting, let our mayor go, let our mayor go. Today there was a video of a woman who is claiming to be the new mayor, and she's pro-Russian. There's been no election, and the mayor is elected position, so a lot of people are very upset about that. And during Volodya's short call with his son, they talked about it, but they were very, very careful because they know that Russian ears are listening. And basically the big thing is they are waiting for the Ukrainian army, and that's about all they would say. So, of course, we, along with Volodya, are praying that the Ukrainian army can take that town, that city back. And it's just right north of Crimea. It's one of the first places that they hit when they came up from Crimea. The Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine said that the evacuation from Mariupol, remember the port city on the Azov Sea, it failed again. It wasn't possible for them to get into Mariupol. They stopped in another town kind of a ways away because there was just so many airstrikes on Mariupol, and they couldn't get in there. They're hoping to get in tomorrow morning. And one of the things that we talked about at lunch today is that there's a lot of pictures out about Orthodox priests who are walking in front of the convoy of the humanitarian aid, and then to get the civilians out of there. And one of the reasons they're doing that, of course, is because the Orthodox religion is very big in Russia. And in some of the Orthodox churches, basically the priest controls whether you go to heaven or not. And so they're using this ploy to kind of intimidate the Russians a bit to see if they can't get the supplies in to Mariupol and evacuate some of the civilians. So we'll see. Hopefully they'll be able to try it again tomorrow. The Russian military killed a very well-known Ukrainian volunteer who has a disability. His name is Alexander Kononov, if I said it correctly. And it was announced on Telegram by one of the officials. Also, a journalist reported in that same area that the Russians went into a house and shot a man dead in his wheelchair. So it doesn't matter if you're disabled or not. The Russians are just basically killing civilians. The number of Ukrainian refugees is approaching 2.7 million right now, the UN noted, and an AFP publication said this is the biggest wave of refugees since World War II. Kind of gives you an idea of how huge this is right now. There's several videos from people who rushed to a school in Nikolaev that was bombed repeatedly by the Russian army. It's in the south of Ukraine. So far they have 4 dead and 3 injured, most likely maybe administrative workers, maintenance men, maybe teachers, because again, the kids are not in school. But again, Russia is just taking out the infrastructure, and they're really targeting schools and hospitals a lot now. The Ukrainian General Staff of the Armed Forces made some statements today. The Russians are gathering forces to strike a specific town in Donetsk region, and they're shelling the residential area there. Russia is keeping in the Black Sea a full ship group, and they're striking Ukraine from those ship groups. Another point in the news, diplomas that are issued by Russian institutes are no longer going to be recognized around the world. And this is for universities or anybody who's applying for a job. If they show a diploma from a Russian school or university, it won't be considered. I can understand where people want to get involved and really kind of fight back any way that they can for this, but this is all kind of setting up a one world government, a global kind of situation here, which those of us who study the Bible, we understand what this can mean. I watched a video of the Russians that were lined up for blocks outside of a McDonald's in Russia because it's the last day of operations. And later on in the day, I saw pictures of just the McDonald's being packed the whole day long. So the Russians are getting their last Big Mac before it's kind of closed. There's a lot of pictures showing up now of stores in Russia where the shelves are empty or half empty. And there's a lot of pictures of people, Russians fleeing to Finland, saying that they're leaving their oppressive regime there in Russia. So lots of cars, and Finland is taking them in. Thousands are being arrested all over Russia for demonstrating against the war. I watched one woman who was talking to someone who was filming her, and she said, there's just 2 words that will get you grabbed and put into a paddy wagon. And then she held up a sign, a little bit smaller than a piece of paper, and the sign actually said 2 words. And in a matter of seconds, there was like 4 or 5 police officers on her, dragging her away. And you could see in the background when she was talking that it was kind of some sort of square, and that there were just police in 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s wandering all over the place because they knew that people were probably going to be demonstrating there. So yeah, just kudos to those people who are demonstrating there. And like in Moscow, there was 6,500 that were arrested, but there are these demonstrations all over Russia right now. There are a lot of videos that Ukrainians are posting of Russian soldiers committing crimes. There was one that I watched where they backed up their armored personnel carrier to the front doors of a store and broke in and stole a bunch of food. I watched one video where they had their armored vehicles and were rolling over Ukrainian cars in the village and just smashing them flat. Another video of them stealing chickens from a Ukrainian home in a town, and they basically clubbed the chickens to death or wrung their necks and put them into a potato sack, but took all of the chickens from this family. And the list just goes on and on. It's amazing, and part of it, I wonder, I've seen some of the prisoner of war Russian soldiers and how they're being interviewed, and they're just drinking tea and eating what's been given to them, almost like they're starving. So kind of makes you wonder why, or it kind of helps you understand, I should say, of why so many Russian soldiers are giving up, because they're just not being taken care of by their own country. Okay, so let's do some good news. The Ukrainian military has a new trophy. They have a Russian bridge paver. It's called an MTU-90 that helps spans bridges, and so they've captured that, and they have a new piece of equipment. The Ukrainian army has pretty much destroyed units of the Russian 155th Separate Marine Brigade. A total of about 600 Russian soldiers were killed. They're still counting them and gathering them up. But a journalist who was with the military unit there said that there was probably that many that are wounded as well. And so they're taking care of them. I did see a lot more videos today of how they're allowing the Russian soldiers to call home. They're asking them for their phone numbers and their families or their towns that they live in, so they can make sure that their family knows that where they are. And that they're captured, but that they're safe and they're being taken care of. And a number of new calls where they allowed the soldiers to call home, and the family's pretty much surprised, totally surprised, that their son is in Ukraine fighting. So a guy named Sergei, who's kind of the head of the Lugansk area fighting for Ukraine, I guess I could say, operational information, says that they were able to evacuate 540 people from a small town in the Lugansk area, put them on a train and got them out of the area. They unloaded 7 wagons of humanitarian aid for the people who are still there, and 11 more of those wagons are on the way. While they were doing this, an enemy plane was shot down in a town not too far away, and there was a lot of shelling going on in the background, but they did get the supplies in. So that's a good news. The Committee of Literary Sciences of the Polish Academy of Sciences has adopted a resolution to nominate Ukrainian writer Sergei Zhadan for the Nobel Prize in Literature. And he is doing a lot of things, writing a lot about free Ukraine, and just some very interesting things. He's a poet, and he's from the Kharkov area, apparently. Thanks went out to the incredible efforts of the Ukrainian energy specialists, nuclear specialists, scientists, and electricians. We had a major issue going on with the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The electricity had been damaged, and without the electricity, they can't cool the plant, and means that it's warming up and going to cause a huge problem. And I think I mentioned yesterday that there was some belief that the Russian soldiers did this intentionally to create a man-made disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear plant and then blame it on Ukraine. But these specialists and scientists and electricians got in there and they were able to restore the power and cool the reactor down. So it's working normally, and it's not on backup power anymore, because initially they were on backup power, but they ran out of fuel. They couldn't get more fuel, and it just was getting very, very critical. So good news. An honored military pilot for the Russian Federation, a Colonel Gennady Stern, appealed to Russian military pilots to immediately stop the destruction of peaceful Ukrainian towns and villages. Kind of interesting that a Russian military man would start to speak that. Just goes to show how much dissension there is in the ranks and how it's growing in Russia. Rabbi Nachman of the International Charitable Foundation, they've decided to collect all the Torah scrolls, which are located in dozens of prayer complexes and synagogues in Uman, which is a little bit east of us. So it's actually like about an hour and a half east of us, and a huge Jewish population there. There's a lot of holidays where the Jews fly in from Israel, but they were really just concerned of theft or desecration of these Torahs during the war, and so now they're transferring them to a very secure location. So that's good, because that's history. Mark and I went to I can't quite remember the name of it. We went to a castle when we were able to get away a couple years ago for a couple days, and we visited this area that used to have a huge Jewish population, and how it was wiped out through history twice and then built back up. So there's a couple places here in Ukraine that have very large Jewish populations. President Zelensky here visited a bunch of wounded soldiers in the hospital today, and I watched part of that video. He greeted the doctors and told them that they were doing a great job. And then he walked through the different wards and talked to a lot of the soldiers. Whenever they asked for a picture, with him, he jumped right up there and did it with them, no problem. Didn't hesitate at all. There was a couple of times he was just listening very intently to them and what they were sharing with him. But there were moments where he was trying to cheer them up. He has a profession of being a comedian and an actor, so he wanted to bring lightness to them. And just one last final post that I just saw pop up a few minutes ago before I started this video. The capital of Ukraine is safe, said the advisor to the head of the OPU, which is operational unit, during a telephone interview. Basically saying you don't have to be worried about Ukraine. All the forces that have been kind of abandoned because they got too far in front of their supply lines, or they got separated and the other units went somewhere else and they got abandoned, all of those have been defeated and taken care of, and a lot of the soldiers, Russian soldiers, are voluntarily surrendering. Also in Kharkov and Sumy and Cherniv, a lot of this is happening as well, and Ukrainian forces are taking better control of some of those areas. The enemy is trying really hard to enter Mariupol right now, and Nikolaev, which was the bombing of the school that I mentioned. But Kiev is relatively safe. And the man who was giving this interview used this phrase, and it took me a while to figure it out, but he said they're going to be thrown into the environmental protection. And I finally figured out that he's meaning like recycle bins or trash bins, that these reserves are being thrown in the trash. If they climb back out, then we're going to kill them, So just kind of another idiom that they kind of use here, like I shared yesterday. So that's it for tonight. We tried to rest a little bit today. We're going to be back at it. Mark is heading out first thing in the morning to go get more supplies. And just continue to keep us stocked up in every way possible. And then he'll get home and got a couple projects that he wants to get done. Some of the guys are going to go help Pastor Sergey chop up some wood again at his village house because he's coming back in tomorrow morning to the village from the town. And I'm going to be working on my veterans disability forms. I've been kind of reviewing them for the doctor here in English, and then hoping that I can get a hold of her, that she can stamp off on them, and then I'm going to scan them and send them to my contact with the VA, and she's going to scan it right into the system because it was due on March 30th, and we were doing the finalizing of it mid-February, and then all this happened. So it's just taken a little bit more to get it done, but hopefully I'll get it submitted on time, and then I'll just wait for them to ask for an appointment for me to go in for the 4 different kind of injuries that I've had, and to get the disability. Never really thought about it until some friends kind of talked to me about it my last trip to America last year. I don't know, you just kind of soldier on and live through the pain, and just didn't really think about it. But they encouraged me to file for the disability, and that would get some money coming in because, as I get older, I'm having more medical issues with some of the injuries that I've had, some very severe in my neck and my hip, and some not so severe, like some unique muscle scarring in my back. Yeah, things like that. So anyway, hoping to get that done. Just continue to pray for us. Pray for the people that we serve, that God would open up their hearts and go before us as we just love on them and share God's word when he gives us the opportunity. And pray for Ukraine, for the soldiers, for the salvation of the people here. Churches have become bigger and bigger here. The faiths are communicating and cooperating better since 2014, and just a lot of spiritual growth going on. And I'm sure that's why Satan's attacking, so just keep us in prayer. And thank you. Good night for me. Good morning for you.